Welcome everyone, one and all, to another Beyond All Reason video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Legion turrets. That's right, it is the Legion turret guide that you all have been waiting for. And there are quite some unique features with the Legion turrets that you won't see with any other factions really, that are quite unique. So we're just going to be starting off with T1. We got all of our T1 turrets over here. And we're going to do a little bit of comparison between the two, just a standard Armada, which has a pretty universal turrets. And then we also have a side-by-side comparison with the Legion as well, just so we can get a better understanding of how they work and their comparison to other factions. So first off, we have the Pharos. I did a little bit of testing earlier on the Pharos, and it does have a little bit of a slower laser fire than your standard light laser turret from other factions, but it has a higher DPS, and that is something that is unique about Legion. Is they have very powerful light laser turrets with the heat ray, but I think they also are a little bit worse at targeting. So that's something to keep in mind with them is, you know, if it's a faster moving target, it might end up getting away from you there. Then we have the Dragon's Jaw. This is actually an incredibly good weapon. You can see it has a large area of effect here that it does. It's kind of like, think of it like a pounder, honestly, with how big the blast radius is, but in a quite significant range as well. So this is going to be exceptional for holding the line and making sure that units cannot push into you very easily. And it's really not that expensive. It's only about 300 metal a piece, so that's not too bad. And that can be compared with the lightning pop-up turret, which has 340 metal and does an electrical blast, which will shock units and like spread and chain damage onto enemy units that are close together. So that's really good at taking out swarms. And then the Cortex turret comparison is pretty similar in that way. It also does a larger area effect, but this Dragon's Jaw, it has a little bit less DPS per second. You can see 120 DPS compared to 158 DPS, but the shock radius is quite large with it, so that is something to keep in mind. So it's pretty unique. Then we have the drones. The drones are a quite interesting turret, and I haven't messed around with them a ton because they add an element of anti-air that is required to actually attack, to attack this, you know. It's definitely a defensive unit in the fact that they can't really hold off a heavy amount of like engagement directly on top of them. They need a large amount of support in front of them, and then they do a lot of poke damage, a lot of just very little ticking away at the opponent. Now keep in mind that every drone costs 15 metal and 500 energy, so it's not free to launch a drone, and they do cost a little bit, but they can add that extra damage to your army to kind of push your opponent back and chip away at what they do have. Now obviously something to keep in mind is all it's going to take is probably one nettle to be placed somewhere in the vicinity. Like if the opponent placed a nettle maybe like right here, they could probably chip away, or I guess it'd have to be further away because you want to stay out of the range. So they'd be around here. They could chip away at your drones while they're doing the engagement, and you know, kind of get free damage with that nettle. So keep that in mind. The drone base is going to be susceptible to light anti-air, but there's something unique that Legion has to offer as far as turrets go. And I definitely want to play around with them more and get a better feel for how to use them. because with the Overwatch tower, it's very simple. You know, you can kind of do a turret walk if you want, and just slowly push forward and take land, build another Overwatch, push forward, take land. You know, do some kind of like zoning with it. With this hive, it's a little bit more pokey, so it doesn't quite do as heavy of damage. And we don't even have a lot of stats. Like, that's the thing that I kind of wish that they would update, is to give you a little bit more stats on the units themselves. And I would expect that as they release the Legion faction, but right now it's pretty limited. It doesn't, you know, the drones themselves, you cannot select or find out the damage that they do, but you can watch the damage that they do as they're firing, and it's, you know, I think it does like 40 damage per shot or something like that. It's around that. I probably should have set up something for them to shoot at to give an example, but anywho, there you have it. Pretty unique building, pretty unique structure. Use it for zoning off your enemy, and make sure you have a good defensive line before you actually build the drone tower, as it does take a while to actually become effective, and it takes a while to get it up. So if you're being heavily pushed, this is not the building for you immediately. You want to get a solid defense, build some other basic turrets, and then you can build a drone station as well to help support. Alrighty, let's go on to the cacophony, however you want to pronounce it. I think it's probably cacophony. Anyway, this is an anti-air, but also anti-spam. It does land and air. So unfortunately, I think the anti-land is a little, yeah, it goes pretty far out there. So it actually has this is the counterpart to the beamer, and you can see it has a decent amount more range compared to the beamer. Quite significant, actually. So and that's something that's interesting. The hive has more range than the Overwatch tower and can do poke damage on the Overwatch tower. The cacophony can do poke damage on the beamer, but it also, I think, is a little bit more expensive at 420, but also has the anti-air aspect as well. So it's a different style of turret. It's a much more expensive turret compared to the beamer being quite cheap, and the beamer does up to 260 damage per second, where this does up to 270 damage per second. So it's quite a significant bump in damage, but still a relatively weak tower if you think about it. It only has 2,200 health. Not really going to be able to take hits very well, but that anti-air capability is a nice touch. It kind of does a dual purpose. Now, something interesting, and that is the actuation. The actuator is, and this is their artillery for Legion. You can see it actually has a relatively short range here, and the spread kind of goes out past the actual distance. But this is a area cluster bombardment, a artillery weapon, and it's quite interesting because it has a significantly shorter distance than the gauntlet. The gauntlet can shoot all the way out to here. Very a significant change between those two. You know, the Legion artillery can only hit up to here, and the gauntlet can hit all the way out to here. So that's a huge difference, a drop in area. So keep in mind, if you are trying to build one of these, do not get zoned out by the standard artillery defenses from the other factions. I would tend to think that using the actuator as a aggressive zone control quickly, like earlier, is a good idea. The fact that it is slightly cheaper than the gauntlet costs 1,250, whereas the actuator costs 850. So it's a significant reduction in cost, and that means you can get yours up faster and earlier than your opponent can. And you don't have to have quite as much metal to actually afford it. The only risk is that they build it behind, and then build their gauntlet behind the range of the actuator, and then your actuator is just basically worthless at that point and ends up getting destroyed. So what I would recommend is you establish your front line. Say your opponent has a bit of defense here. You know, they have radar jamming or whatever, what have you. You build your actuator within a decent range so that it can poke away. Then as they retreat their back line to be further back, you reclaim and rebuild another one, probably up here, and just slowly keep a constant, steady pressure. That's the only way that this is going to be as effective as the gauntlet, is to keep that steady forward pressure with it, because otherwise your opponent will be able to build a gauntlet and destroy that defense. Essentially, the best range wins in a kind of gauntlet, artillery stalemate. Generally, the best range wins. So keep that in mind. A little bit of a difficulty there with the actuator. You're going to have to be very active in that. And then we also have a couple other defense, anti-air. I didn't really do the basic anti-air because they all relatively are the same in how they work. There's not anything that special about them as far as I am aware. Anti-air missile salvo, it does 156 damage. They are relatively cheap at 280. I think most factions, the anti-bomb or the bomb resistant missile battery is around the same cost. The anti-air flak battery, that's pretty good in the fact that it's a flak cannon, but it's around the same cost as your other heavier anti-air for T1. So I didn't really want to talk a ton about these because they're all relatively the same with minor differences that, some are to keep in mind. They are to keep in mind. Okay, now we have the Olympus. This is a long-range plasma cannon. Super cool weapon. The nice thing about it is that it fires 3 shots in combination with each other, hitting in a variety of areas and then doing a cluster separation on contact. So that means that they are going to be very good at ticking down the shields of opponents. I'm not sure exactly how many you'll need to break through the shield. I would imagine you need maybe a little bit less because of that constant damage that it will be doing. And it's also going to be good at doing a larger area of damage. With a normal plasma cannon, you're going to be doing one solid zone of damage. With this plasma cannon, you're damaging a very large surface area. So that is pretty cool. It's going to add a lot of ability to potentially pop economies better because it's a much larger footprint, much more potential for damage to actually happen. Next, we have the Supernova. I'm going to skip the Starfall for now because there's some special things about the Starfall that we're going to be discussing, and we're saving the best for last. So we got the Supernova. This is the nuke missile. Nothing too special about the nuke for Legion. It's devastating. It does what is this? 11,000 damage per missile. Incredible. As every nuke will do, it will absolutely dumpster anything that it comes in contact with. Massive explosion. Beautiful. A rain of destruction and fallout would be ensued. So, standard nuke, what you expect, but it looks very cool. I love it. It has the little nuke symbol on there, and the little, I guess, what is this, like plutonium or something? Plutonium barrels on the side. Who knows? Who knows how these things are charged up? Anyway, we got the anti-air Gatling battery. This is essentially your T2 flat cannon. Pretty basic. essentially the same thing as you would expect with any anti-air. It's going to do well at cluster damage. Then we have the long-range anti-air. This guy is able to target and charge. I believe this actually doesn't do charged missile attacks. This just shoots a single shot. Yeah, it shoots single burst shots. So it's not going to be the same as your charged missiles, but rather a single target hit. So that could be actually helpful, as the charged shots can lead to waiting to reload and kind of getting all used up rapidly. Next, we have the Grenadier the grenade launcher defense, the Bombardier, sorry. The Bombardier, and this is a unique building. It's the pop-up defense, T2, and I really actually love the Bombardier because it has a deceivingly long range of attack. And that's because if it doesn't hit its target, it will bounce the bombs further than other defenses. So it's quite a deceptive range tied to this. And if you know that your opponent is somewhere in, if you know your opponent is over here somewhere, but your Bombardier tower is not able to hit, maybe it actually can. Boom, boom. So you can do a little bit of chip damage if you use some of that active targeting and maybe do a little bit of extra juicy damage on your opponents. Now we have the Bastion. It is a shorter range tower than some of the other factions, compared to the Armada faction, at least for sure. It is a very strong tower, if I get it to attack properly. There we go. It does a massive heat laser that blasts and fries everything in a area. And this is essentially to be compared with the Pulsar or the, what do they call it? Why am I forgetting the name? Come on. It's the Cortex T2 building. Why am I forgetting the name? Anyway, you guys know what it is. I can't believe it because I absolutely love that turret. Anyway, I just got home from work, so sorry about that, folks. You can tell me in the comments and yell at me for being completely ridiculous and forgetting the name of the Cortex T2 heavy laser turret defense. Anyway, the Bastion, very, very effective. Now, keep in mind, this is something interesting that applies to both the Pulsar and the Bastion and the Cortex T2 version, and that is the fact that if you turn it off, it will have a armor mode, essentially, that keeps it from taking as heavy of damage. So this is something that's a unique thing to actually a lot of turrets, is the fact that if you can turn them off, they will be in a more secure state where they won't be quite as impacted from heavy weapons or like missiles or artillery. You can kind of take the blows a bit further. I believe it doubles the health of the structure when you turn it off like this. I'm not entirely sure. Let's see if it actually tells us. So max HP is, yeah, plus 300% when closed. So right now it's in a closed state and it has a total of 48,000 HP as opposed to 12,000 HP. So it's definitely much more resilient when it's closed. Something to keep in mind, very strong, very powerful. In fact, one thing you can do is you can build one bastion here, build another bastion here and another bastion here. You wait till everyone is fighting at and targeting this bastion, you close it, and then you open this one and you open this one, and these ones will shoot at your attacking force while this one's taking the hits, and this one will be even more resilient, able to take the damage and hopefully not be destroyed by the incoming fire because it's in a closed state, giving it 300 times the HP. So something to try and attempt and see if you like it. Another pro tip would be to build a set of T2 walls in the front here. You could even go like 3 or 4 thick with it, because that adds just basically extra HP. Let's see, where's our T2 constructor? Do we have? Yeah, there we go. A T2 wall. It only costs, what, 40 metal a piece? And it has 8,000 health per wall. So if you build like 7 walls here, you know, in front, or like 3 walls thick, that's 8 times 3, and you got yourself a very, very tanky Bastion that will largely not be taking hits from direct fire. So keep that in mind. Little tips to help keep your fortifications strong. Now we have the artillery. That is the T2 artillery. This is the counterpart to the rattlesnake, or the aggravator, I believe is the Cortex version. Aggravator. And it does essentially more damage and a little bit more range, but it is also, once again, going to be outranged by the rattlesnake and the aggravator. So keep that in mind. I think, or is it agitator? One of them is T2, one of them is T3. I don't know. I don't remember. But yeah, so the T2 artillery is once again going to have a slightly shorter range, but do cluster damage, which is once again pretty handy. A significant blob of damage there. So very cool. Next, we've got the long range artillery napalm. This is similar to the tactical nuke launcher, but it launches napalm. Now, I am not personally a huge fan of this napalm launcher. It does do, let me see, a 2,000 damage per shell, and then it does burning damage over time. But in comparison to the tactical nuke, it just seems a little bit weaker in my opinion. And it does have a lot of cost, 500 metal per shot, which is quite significant. I think they might have adjusted it. It might have been even worse than that before. I think they've adjusted it to be a little bit better. Test it out. See, let me guys know in the comments what do you guys think of it. I'm still kind of giving it a little bit of time to fully put a verdict out on it. I think it has room to grow though. So we will see. Now we get the Starfall. This is a quite a devastating weapon here. This is essentially the Ragnarok of Legion, and it's unique in the fact that you can see here it says 360,000 energy per volley, which means every time you press the fire button on this puppy, it uses 360,000 energy just in shooting the thing. But when you do shoot it, man, that is a very juicy explosion that will be rained down on your opponents. So yeah, you'll need let's see, what do you need in order to fire this thing? Let's talk about that. Because who wouldn't want to fire this, right? Who wouldn't want to fire it? It's quite expensive at 48,000 metal, and it is definitely a game ender of a turret. But man, you need, how many is that? 9 energy storages maxed out just to get to be able to fire this thing. You might be able to get away with 8. But even then, 8 energy storages, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy, a lot of metal to just shoot this once. So make sure that you place it in a good position. When you're getting ready to place this thing, do a double check to make sure you can hit some of the economies, hit some of the defenses, absolutely dumpster your opponents. Because if you don't, boy, moving one of these is a lot of work. A lot of work and a lot of build power. Probably not something you want to end up having to place twice in a row. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, be sure to leave a comment, like the video, and also subscribe. We're very, very close to 1,000 subscribers. when we get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be going over a special scenario instance, talking. It's basically a guide, T1 guide for y'all on some different strategies for frontline. So if you would enjoy that video, definitely subscribe if you haven't already. We're very, very close to the 1,000 mark. And thank you all. Appreciate you all hanging and bearing with all of my shifting in schedule and the craziness that's been happening. First we had a baby, then we got a new job, and just everything's going nuts. So appreciate you, and thank you for hanging out and bearing with me through this time of shifting. We will see you guys on the next video and on the battlefield.